So welcome everybody. This is an Open University sponsored event as part of Net Zero Week, the UK's National Awareness Week. And we're really delighted to welcome you this morning and to have a panel discussion today on how you might get organisational buy-in for clean energy and low carbon strategies within your workplace. So I'm delighted this morning to have a panel from across different industries, and I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and also one of our Open University students. So that's really positive. My name's Dr. Victoria Hans, and I'm Director of Sustainability at the Open University. So I'm responsible for leading the embedding of sustainability across the whole of our curriculum, our research and knowledge exchange, our innovation, and our operations. And I'll be drawing on some of our net zero actions within this discussion. You've got the slide there with our panel speakers. So I'm going to welcome Fred, Maria, Sophie and Rishi, and we're going to go to full screen so we can see the panel, and then we're going to ask our speakers to introduce themselves, and we're going to have a discussion. The chat, I believe, is open for you, so if you want to pop questions in the chat, it will be monitored, but we're not going to respond directly unless there are key themes that arise during this session. But please, we will monitor the chat, and we might group together questions if there's a topic or a theme that really shines through. Otherwise, after this session, we'll be able to share with you some information that we've gathered together from our panelists, so you've got a little how-to guide. So if we can go to panel view, please. And I will welcome Maria, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Victoria, and good morning, everyone. And thank you to Open University for hosting this session as part of Net Zero Week. As Victoria mentioned, my name is Maria. I am an associate solicitor at Core Maxwell. Core Maxwell is a female-led and owned B Corp certified law firm based in London. And at Core Maxwell, sustainability is not peripheral to our practice. It's embedded in our firm's identity and our values. We're committed to using business as a force for good, balancing people, profit, and purpose in everything that we do. So I hope that the examples that I share today offer useful perspective on what purposeful, value-led sustainability looks like in a professional services environment and how that translates into meaningful organizational action.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm inspired from the organisational setup. Thank you, Maria. And Fred, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Victoria, and great to be here as part of the Open University Net Zero Week initiatives. I'm Fred. I'm with Ecosia, which is the world's largest not-for-profit search engine. We dedicate 100% of our company profits to financing climate action, primarily through investing in tree planting projects and investing in renewable energy as well. We're also the default search engine at the Open University, and having a fantastic impact thanks to employees and students searching with us.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm also delighted to welcome Sophie, one of our Open University students. Hello, Sophie. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I'm a final year natural sciences student at the Open University. So I'm specialising in environmental science, sustainability and climate policy. And alongside my studies, I've supported climate and sustainability research through Climate Compatible Growth and the WIP Academy, but a lot of my experience comes from leading a community garden project that in the care home I work in Northern Ireland. So through both my studies and that project, I've become really interested in how nature-based solutions and community engagement and environmental communication can help to bridge the gap between policy and action. So yeah, I'm happy to meet everybody and looking forward to taking part in the discussion today.
Brilliant. Thanks for being here, Sophie. And Rishi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi folks, yeah, just had some emergency tech change, but hopefully that's been seamless and quiet. So my name's Rishi Madlani. I've spent 20 years in financial services, specialising in climate finance, sustainable investment. I advise the board of the London CIV, which is a £55 billion investment pool for London's local government pension schemes on climate stewardship and investment strategy. I spent 12 years as a local government councillor, where I helped drive climate action at local authority level. And alongside this, I serve on the governing bodies of the University of Leicester. I'm an emeritus governor at the LSE, where I first met Victoria 20 years ago, working on these issues and topics. And I work across a number of charities and non-profit organisations. So hopefully I'll draw upon a number of different perspectives in today's discussion.
Brilliant, thank you. So I hope you can see we've got a varied panel with varied experience, and we hope that experience is going to be relevant to you in your organisations and inspire you to take action. So I'm going to start first by asking the panel about collaboration. So we know that's an essential part of what sustainability is, and we need to be developing our collaboration skills. But we also know that supply chain collaboration outside our organisation is really essential for delivering net zero. So how have you gone about that, and have you got examples of really positive supply chain collaboration that we might all learn from? So I'm going to come to you first, Rishi. Thank you.
Happy to kick the ball rolling on this one. So the example I'd like to just bring to the audience and panel's awareness was something work we did at the London Borough of Camden. So started this sort of in 2014, where sometimes some of the EV technology wasn't as mature or was not at a price effective point that we can make it work. So over a decade, basically every contract that came to the council, we would ask the providers, depending whatever it was, the main one being waste. I mean, we all have our rubbish collected and recycling collected as the main provider. So every year, or every 3 years in that case, where we retendered, we would push them to see what the latest evolution was. Now, I was sort of when we first iteration of this was actually compressed natural gas, and it happened to be that there was already that infrastructure in Camden. Now, that intuitively didn't sound quite right for me. It did make sense because it was then the right transition tool to use that compressed technology. It was the lowest cost effectiveness. And now I'm delighted to say in recent years, with the price of EV fleet coming down, you've been able to see that switch. And depending on what the technology and what the use case is, you can then switch over a transition period. I think that's something really important to think about, because it may not be the technology you think is immediately there, but by working with your supplier, in that instance it was Veolia, we'd really kick the tires hard to see what the different options are.
Yeah, and that sounds that it could have implications and ripples out and be adoptable by lots of organisations. Thank you. So at the Open University, one of the things we wanted to work on was our reducing our digital impact. So I'm going to come to you, Fred, next, because we have this lovely collaboration with Ecosia. Would you like to say a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So at Ecosia, I oversee our B2B strategy. So primarily I support large organizations to implement our search engine as the default search engine for employees. I will explain that we make money just like any other search engine, which is when people click on the ads displayed in our search results. But what makes us so different from the other search engines out there is that we dedicate all of our profits to climate action. So my role is specifically to help organizations to take this step and to really embed sustainability and climate action within their digital infrastructure and software tools. And was really delighted to work closely with Avril at the Open University, who I believe is on this call, to roll out Ecosia across the university. And we really have been able to measure the impact of that, the number of searches employees do, and then the estimated number of trees that we've been able to plant thanks to and the organization taking this step. And you know, I think that we find that organizations are wanting to use our search engine because it really complements the other sustainability objectives that they have, and it's a way that they can reduce their digital footprint in a really meaningful and impactful way. And so I think that we're finding that organizations want to do good. They want to help plant trees. They want to use software that is managed in an environmentally sound way. And we found that also that employee engagement aspect, making employees feel that they are contributing to something meaningful every day, has been really important for other organizations considering using us. I will also just say that as well as planting trees, we also made the commitment at Ecosia to invest in renewable energy, and we built in 2017 our own solar plant in Germany. And this solar farm now produces twice as much renewable energy than what is needed to power our servers globally. So we actually go beyond net zero as an organization. We don't just reach net zero and call it a day, but we produce a surplus amount of renewable energy and then sell this clean energy back to the grid. And so it's not actually a cost building this solar farm. It's been an investment, and we continue to see the benefits of that going beyond net zero, both in terms of our investments in clean energy, but also because we're planting trees that are sequestering carbon, that is also helping to reduce the global levels of carbon in the atmosphere. So we really want to encourage businesses to go further and to do more and think about not just their carbon footprint, but also their green handprint that they can make within their operations.
Thanks, Fred. And that net positive, going beyond net zero to a net positive impact is so important. And if we think back to the first Stern report, and obviously the figures have changed, but then it was sort of for every pound invested, you're saving 10 in the future. And those figures have really changed, and there's energy security as well in renewables, as we're seeing. Does anybody else want to come in on that supply chain? Maria, yes, please.
So from the point of view of professional services, our supply chain operates differently from companies that require raw materials to produce physical products. We've found as a law firm that specializes in disputes and litigation, and that's certainly the practice area that I specialize in. It's not so much about the suppliers we use, but instead how we supply or deliver our work output. So as a firm that specializes in litigation, we have been working towards becoming an entirely paperless law firm, but that's quite difficult in the litigation space because the civil procedure rules still require hard copy bundles, and certainly some, older school judges require and prefer hard copy bundles. However, we've made it our mission to, work to persuade or encourage courts and judges to accept e-bundles. His litigation has historically been, enormously paper intensive, and every e-bundle that we submit instead of a hard copy one is able to reduce or produce a tangible reduction in paper waste and print costs, because as you can imagine, once that case or that hearing or that trial is over, there's no use for that paper, and it just kind of, it's paper that obviously needs to be recycled. But yeah, so whilst this requires, advocacy and persistence on our side, it's definitely something that we're passionate about as a firm, and we're hoping to make significant impact in our usage of paper on a day-to-day basis.
Great example. And I think so that for me, the key message for organisations is to work with your procurement teams and to identify within the procurement cycle, what are your forthcoming tenders? What are your large spend tenders? And how can you, draw on and learn from others in that space to embed sustainability and net zero requirements within those tenders so that you're pushing that requirement through the supply chain. And as Rishi said, that might happen over a long period of time as you go, in 3 to 5 year cycles of procurement. But but that enables you, and you gather ideas through that supply chain. So I think that's a really positive message for organisations. Great. So I'm going to move on and ask the panel about green tech specifically. So how have you enabled the adoption of green tech, and some examples of green tech that you might have enabled to help us reach those net zero targets? So hands up, who would like to come in there on green tech? Rishi, I've seen you first, thank you. And Sophie, can I just check, will you come in afterwards on nature-based? Thanks. Rishi.
Brilliant. So on thanks, Victoria. So on technologies, one of the examples I'd like to share is some work we did at NatWest. So under our CEO, at that stage we'd got climate to the top of house as one of the strategic priorities. So one of the things that we could then drive through the organisation was pushing every aspect of the work that you did as an organisation to think about climate. So one of the big things we, as a bank, we're big bankers of entrepreneurs and startups and small businesses, and actually creating a space in our entrepreneurial hubs to make sure, firstly, a percentage of those were allocated to businesses that were focused on sustainability and climate, then meant that we were having ideas that were actually physically gestating in our own properties, in our sites that you were having there, but then using our workplace services teams where, you know, the real estate of NatWest would have been large offices, branches, quite a mix, and data centers, obviously, a real mix of different types of real estate. So you could then think about what those technologies you could apply. So things like water saving technologies in bathrooms, or energy efficiency tech, things like where we've started to think about water and testing these out. Now, some of these wouldn't work or would not work as well, but because you'd have a range of real estate, you'd have an opportunity to try some of those out, and actually working with your clients there then also helped create that sort of symbiotic effect where you're supporting each other. So for me, that was a really important one. I'd give one example of failure in this. I think it's also important to acknowledge that when I was on a Seas board, where we try now with solar, everyone knows it's very straightforward. You can't really fail with solar. The returns, as Fred outlined earlier, sort of transparent, especially when it co-aligns with your use times of when you need the electricity. Now, there were certain technologies, but we were able to take sometimes you have to gamble. You have to know your buildings, know the sites you're on. Obviously in a lot of our buildings, we're looking at retrofits, we're looking at different pieces. And unfortunately, we tried a ground source heat exchange, but it didn't quite work. Now, appreciate that, but it's important to then learn and understand why that didn't work, and then share that learning amongst the higher education community so others don't make that same mistake or understand why the dynamics that didn't work. But I think in some of these things we have to test and learn. We will get certain things right, but I think it's important to understand your own use, energy use, and thinking about what technologies might be applicable. But sometimes some of it there is some risk in this, but I think it's a calculated risk that it's important to think about.
Yeah, I love that learning from failure as well, Rishi, and sharing that learning out with others. That's really important. And so, Sophie, I'm going to come to you on some nature green tech.
Yeah, sorry, I think I might be speaking to another point, Victoria.
Oh, sorry, I thought your hand had come up. No worries.
Sorry.
So I'm just going to give a little example from the Open University in terms of nature-based solutions. So we have obviously a range of academics, that's our core business. And so we've, with our academics, they've set up a living laboratory where we're piloting green roof as a green technology. And so we know globally that there's really good data to show the heat island effect, especially in urban areas, and that green roofs can provide a solution both to protect the building and the occupants to keep the heat down, because most of our roofs are dark coloured, drawing in the heat, but also to enhance biodiversity. But there isn't actually any UK data on this. So our academics are researching a couple of things. So they've got tiny little cameras which they're putting on the roof so that we can track the biodiversity that's attracted to the flora that is grown on the roof. And also we're testing different sorts of substrata, the material that the green roof can be planted into, because that's often a concern when we're retrofitting roofs with green roofs, is what's the weight, what's the rainwater attenuation, is that going to affect the viability of the roof? So the more we can research and have data to reassure organisations that that sort of green retrofitting is really impactful. And then that also addresses that heat island effect, where we've got series of buildings which have green roofs, we find that the whole local climate, just on a micro level, is cooler. So, and you may have been to some amazing roof gardens across the world, but also in the UK, where you have huge trees, you know, so there's another opportunity for Ecosia, Fred. I don't know if you've planted on rooftops, but sometimes you forget you're on a rooftop because the trees are fairly mature and the shading from trees, you know, is so cooling. So that's so how does one enable that? Well, it's really by doing site visits to see what works. And we find that experiential visit is 100 times more impactful than your business case paper taken to the board, you know, with a request for funding. So you can work out the finances, the return on investment, the payback period. But if you take your CFO or your finance team and you sit and have a meeting in one of those areas that have a nature-based solution, I think it speaks for itself. So I would really, you know, on your team away days or team building events, that's a immeasurable, perhaps a little bit anecdotal, but it seems to then enable people to get through those business cases. Anybody else want to come on green tech and enabling the adoption of green tech? Fred.
Yes, just to quickly second your point there, Victoria, that I think that telling the narrative around the sustainability initiative that you're putting forward is really vital. And you know, marketing is always about telling stories. And you know, with Ecosia, we finance tree planting projects in over 35 different countries, and it's not just about planting trees and calling it a day, but it's working with the local communities and helping them to live more sustainably with their land, restoring desertified landscapes. And so it's always about the community empowerment, and that really is you know, one of the main success factors that we look at, and we use green tech to monitor this. So we use satellite technology to monitor the biomass within an area, but it's always comes back to the people. You know, how has this tree planting project changed people's lives? What have they been able to do now? Is it new sources of income? Is it you know, increased shade so they can plant a different kind of crop? This is all really, you know, something that we look at and you know, don't take for granted. It's not just about the number of trees we plant and the carbon that we sequester, but it's really about what's the real world impact happening here. And I think that really is something that's very convincing for you know, leadership when putting forward your ideas.
That's great. And it's sort of, well, we'll segue into the role of communication in a moment, but it makes us think about the KPIs we use. So sometimes when we're delivering net zero, I think we're really fixated on the CO2 emissions or the CO2e equivalent emissions. And it becomes very, yeah, Excel chart, or, you know, or your online system, it's measuring, it's making decisions based on the CO2, and then you've got the financial implications. But when we broaden that out to the people and the social value and the longer term impacts, environmental positive impacts, I think that brings it to life. And that's, you know, we're businesses at the end of the day, we have to be financially sustainable. So how do we broaden that out so that we're sustainable over the longer term and we have that positive social and environmental impact? Does anybody else want to come in there or come in on the role of communication in bringing about cultural change? I think we've had a couple of really nice examples. Maria.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of what Fred said, you know, sustainability is a lot of it is about storytelling. And I think that's definitely what we found within our organization. So when we first certified as a B Corp, and you know, we were trying to figure out how to get buy-in from the entire team, because you know, it's one thing to have the right policies, the right supplies, the right targets, the right measuring the right data, but if the culture isn't there, you know, the efforts, they're not going to stick, they're not going to maintain, be sustainable. And so, you know, for me, that was really an important element, and kind of explaining to the team why I was so passionate about being a B Corp and our sustainability efforts. The reason was because, you know, the values that we had as a firm had already aligned with B Corp values before we even certified. So it just felt like the perfect fit. And the real difference between, you know, being told to be sustainable and feeling like you're part of something meaningful, where the first creates compliance, where the second creates culture, and culture is really built through that communication. So yeah, I think that it's a key factor in kind of getting the whole team on, you know, that buy-in.
Definitely, thank you. And I think that links into a whole host of, you know, what is the story we're telling? And you know, if it's the stick as opposed to the carrot, then we might not bring our whole selves, and therefore we might not be as innovative or creative. And our teams might feel that they're being told to do rather than being empowered to innovate and bring their whole selves. So the story is really important. And I've been lucky enough to spend some time with Rob Hopkins, the founder of Transition Towns, who's written about how we fall in love with the future, because often the future that we're presented with in relation to climate change is a dystopian future. It's a future based on fear, and it's a future based on lack, doing less or going without things. And that is a difficult selling point. You know, it's difficult to sell. That's not. Whereas there's also a flip side. If we're using less fossil fuel, we can be using more renewables, and we can be creating with those, you know, designing those renewables with a systems level approach and thinking about the materials we use, and embodying or bringing in the circular economy. So we've got flows of materials and flows that cycle round for as long as possible. So it feels like we're on the cusp of, you know, moving away from those dystopian sort of frightening visions. And that's not to deny the impact of climate change, especially, well, you know, perhaps we're experiencing some of that now in the UK with extreme weather, but globally, you know, that's the impact is really extreme, and it's been around for quite a while. So I think that cultural change and the stories we tell of empowerment and to bring people in are really important. Does anybody else have anything else they want to offer in terms of that? Sophie, can I come to you?
Yeah. So I think effective communication can help to bridge the gap between people understanding sustainability and then actually taking action. So from my experience with the garden project, I find that just talking about biodiversity or climate change wasn't what actually encouraged people to get involved. So instead, making sustainability something that they could get involved with hands-on. So through growing food for us, creating wildlife-friendly spaces, bringing residents together with school children through nature-based workshops. It's all pretty small scale, but I think it does demonstrate how nature-based solutions can contribute to wider net zero ambitions, not just by supporting biodiversity, but also by helping people connect back with the environment, with sustainability, and also encourage long-term behavior change. And then in terms of maintaining momentum I think regular communication, so especially through social media, celebrating those small successes and also sharing positive outcomes can all help to build momentum as well and get people invested in your project or your initiative. So yeah, I think communication isn't just about raising awareness or trying to teach people something. It's just helping them feel as though they can genuinely be part of the solution. Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do anyway.
Thanks, Sophie. And I think that's such a good point, that connection with nature. You know, if we all sort of think for a minute, what do we most value? I mean, initially we might think it's, you know, earning a bigger salary or delivering, you know, our objectives at work or progressing. And then we might expand that out into our families and then be thinking about what the younger people in our families, the future they face. But when you boil it down, if you think about what we almost look forward to each year, it's usually our annual leave. And that's when we spend time with our friends or our family, our loved ones. And then it's usually we remember where we spend that time. So were we in the sea, or were we on a boat on the ocean, or were we skiing or in nature? And so nature, bringing nature back into the heart of our businesses, I feel like that is a shared value that we can mostly connect on, and the importance of that. You know, we've seen WWF and some of their campaigns with that. You know, at the Open University, we have an amazing relationship with the BBC. So many of the co-productions with Sir David Attenborough, who's the nation's treasure, you know, they're, you know, we all love those documentaries and seeing nature. And what I found most moving is in recent productions, the interviews with the camera crew who might have been lucky enough to return several times to the same location. And when they've said how they feel about the changes that they've experienced and witnessed over the years. And that inspires me, that brings me back to my desk to write or refine the business case and to do some more number crunching or CO2e crunching to try and find solutions. But it's that sustains and inspires us. Any other examples of communication? Thank you, Rishi.
Sure. So one of the examples, I mean, and thanks, Sophie, you really got me thinking there about how communications is ultimately about meeting the people where they're at. So if you're engaging your volunteers, you know, we as a climate space, sustainability space, we risk going into jargon very easily and we can lose people, and actually we have to learn from that to understand how we engage people. And the example I'd like to share is sort of when we launched this NatWest's climate strategy. One of the key things is one thing your CEO saying it's important, but you then needed to talk to the organization. And what we found was that we actually had to tweak our sustainability narrative to remind everyone that this wasn't just a philanthropic piece. Philanthropy is really important, but actually to really talk about it commercially. So for an early stage of my career, I was a financier of renewables, and people would think, oh, that's nice, you do the renewables over there. This isn't concession renewables, this is making money for the bank. It was helping the bottom line. And it was one of those pieces where you sort of almost had to shift the narrative on this. And when you zoom back out, that actually then has to be, what does that mean for anyone in any of our organizations, whether it's a law firm, whether it's a university, whether it's a tech platform. You need to think about what does everyone's role look like in contributing to that. And actually what we do have is multiple experts in different areas, and thinking about everyone's role as a climate role and actually laddering up to that broader piece. I think one of the key things we need to really think about as a sector and a space, I mean, by people who are on this webinar, people who are interested in pursuing net zero, but we need to talk about this more in language of things that make a social impact and make the social value that Victoria was talking about. And I refer back to the electrification of waste vehicles. The biggest benefit of those of your dustbin trucks being picked up, being electrified, is they're less noisy in the morning, so everyone gets a better night's sleep. There is still some noise, it's not silent, but we should talk about that story as much as we talk about the electrification, because though that's important and it's a decarbonisation piece, the impact on people's lives of better air quality, but also lower noise is really important. And I think we need to be continuously thinking about how we evolve our language around this. You know, Victoria put it very eloquently, carbon emissions are very important and we need to be measuring them, but that's not what will resonate with people as in Sophie's example.
Yeah, that's so true. So it's speaking the language of the people you're listening to, working with. And I love what you said, meeting people where they're at, Sophie. Anybody else with any communications examples? So I think that segues really nicely into the impact of training and development. So we've said a few times, it's not about telling people what to do, and it's not about teaching, although we do need to raise awareness. So what is the impact of training and development to accelerate our progress towards net zero? Can you give me some examples, panelists, of where training and development has supported and aided? I'll probably come to you, Rishi, first, if that's okay.
I'm always happy to get the ball rolling. When we launched, again, some example at NatWest, when we launched our climate strategy, one of the key things I did was work with my learning team, who had excellent partnerships with fantastic universities like the Open University. They could talk about the programs we needed to make sure that there's education and training possibilities for your organisation. Now, you need some basics in understanding how climate change, what the impacts of climate change are, and what net zero are. But the reality is, actually, people need things that are applicable to their day-to-day roles, or how they can ladder to these goals. You could spend days and days looking at climate science, and it would be, I'm sure, very interesting, but it wouldn't necessarily help you in everyone's day-to-day jobs. So we worked on a program that eventually trained 30,000 colleagues. It was slightly mad. I called them my carbon army, with people who just had some knowledge about climate and engaged to enable them just to think about what it would mean for their jobs. The training program we worked with, a university partner, was developed to think with content from our own colleagues, so that we had films and stories from obviously senior colleagues, but actually from different functions within an organization, whether it's your marketing team, whether it's your treasury team, whether it's your branch manager. So they could all talk about what different impacts they can have, because everyone can play their part in this. And this for me was one of the most transformative things. I'd always believed in education. I've always a big advocate of this and helping us, but actually the ability to just systematically encourage people to think differently and come up with great ideas was so powerful. Now, that will be different in all of your organizations, wherever you are. Think about what that might be. Is it some basic climate literacy? There are great charities, fantastic universities like the Open University providing, there's a whole program of net zero weeks. But think about what are those bits that you want to do to help you. And then what we've seen now is a real good proliferation of sustainability focus in specific practitioners. So whether I won't steal any of Maria's thought and thunder, but in the law, I've seen the Chancery Lane project, seeing in risk, GARP, all sorts of different areas where you've seen specialism arrive in climate. So look out for that in the specialism of area you're working in as well.
Brilliant. Can I come to you, Maria, now? You've got some examples of that.
Yeah. So in terms of training, when we received our B Corp certification, I think this was something that we wanted to ensure that we did properly, because while B Corp is an accreditation that people throw around quite commonly, it's not very clear to everyone what exactly that means in practice. And I think having the tools so that the team can understand exactly what it is and how it is that they can get involved in different impact areas. So there's the way that B Corp works, there's 5 impact assessment areas, and you are graded, you're provided a mark against all those 5 areas. And so they are quite far reaching in terms of, it's not just sustainability efforts, but it's also people and well-being. And so just being able to provide the team with the tools to understand that if there is an initiative that they are passionate about, that there's always scope and room for us to implement those somewhere within the B Corp impact kind of areas that we are being assessed on.
Yeah, and I think the importance of there is of making sustainability everyone's job. That's really critical. But it's not to put a pressure on people, it's to see it as a career development. So at the Open University, we encourage managers to have discussions with the people they manage to say, well, how could you contribute? Do you have ideas? And it can unlock innovation. It can sort of rejuvenate or give a focus in terms of objectives for the following year. And obviously we support that through, and on the call we have Gabriella and Avril, but Gabriella and Avril support that through a system where each of our units can specify what their contribution is, what's their environmental impact, how can they work to reduce that. So either through mitigation activities, but also thinking about adaptation. And obviously training and development is a really big aspect of adaptation. How do we adapt if we're not learning and accessing different resources? So making sustainability everyone's job is a way of sort of spreading that out through the organisation. And within those of you who work in sustainability already know that initially sustainability wasn't anyone's job, and then it became someone's job. So many of you on the call and, many of the panelists, that was our job. I'm Director of Sustainability, but obviously one person and one team, however well resourced, can only do so much. What we want are those experts in each of their areas to engage with this and really become experts in sustainability, expanding their current level of expertise. So we've worked with professional bodies to ask them, how are you supporting your members? So that's across the range of professional bodies in the UK. How are you supporting your members with these contemporary issues? And we've asked our students, and remember the Open University, about 30% of our students are traditional students, so they're young people coming through the education system, but the majority of our students are people who are in work already and have families and other commitments. So we really tailor our learning to people who are in the workplace already. But we ask them, are you being served by your professional bodies? Are you being served by the curriculum that's being taught? And although they're engaged and motivated to learn, they're saying, well, we really need our curriculum to respond to the contemporary challenges that we're facing today and that we'll face in the future, because we want to be leaders in those fields, but within these current challenging circumstances. So I think whenever we're commissioning training and development, we need to be thinking, how can we make sure that knowledge can be applied in the workplace, become skills that influence behaviors and influence behavior in the workplace, the next day, the next decision making, the next board paper. It's really important. Anybody else want to come in on training and development from the panel? And otherwise, I think that segues really nicely into the final area I want us to consider, which is how we influence and support senior leaders, so our decision makers. So I'm talking C-suite leaders. And in particular, I think it's really important we influence, inform, work alongside, collaborate with our CFOs, our chief finance officers, because if we're able to make every pound a green pound, we'll be able to influence the supply chain. If it's written in, we'll be able to adopt new technologies, because we'll understand that longer term perspective in terms of return on investment and resilience. And obviously, all of that needs to be that creates part of our cultural change. So panelists, what experience can you share in terms of influencing senior leadership? Can I come to you first, Maria, and then I'll probably come to you, Fred, and then Rishi.
So at Comaxwell, I'm quite fortunate that, the spearheading of our sustainability efforts and using the business as for good was really from our CEO and founder. She kind of led the charge into, ensuring that we are receiving an accreditation that holds us accountable. So it's not just about saying, we're sustainable and we use our profits for good, but it's also being transparent in that, knowing that there is a third party body that is assessing how well we do in every aspect of being a B Corp, and is able to hold us accountable to those values. But I think just generally, I think someone mentioned it earlier, I think Sophie mentioned that the most effective way to bring senior leaders in is to connect to what they already care about. So their legacy, their business's reputation, client relationships, talent acquisition. And I think, certainly for us, talent acquisition is something that we like to, at that stage already, bring into the conversation of sustainability and of, being a B Corp, because it just ensures that the ethos of new talent coming in are aligned with ours. And it also establishes that that behavior and that thinking is already inherently there. So you don't have to work as much to ensure that that behavior kind of is sustained.
Yeah, that's inspirational, thinking about the legacy our leaders can leave. And one lovely way of looking at that is thinking how we can become good ancestors. So that means that we're already standing in the future as a good ancestor, and thinking about, how our actions today can pave a pathway for others. So I really encourage you to think from that framing of being a good ancestor. And I think, the financial implications of attracting and retaining talent, and, ensuring that people, values aligned business, purpose-led business, it's very motivational. And certainly surveys show that recent graduates are really looking for organizations that want them to bring their values to the workplace, and then utilize their intellect and all of their skills, their learning, to grow a business in a way that's going to grow us all. And I think the equity issue is also a really important consideration that students bring to us. It's not just about this business doing well, it's about all business and global. What would it be if a business goal was for global good as opposed to individual shareholder profit? And I think, we're hearing more and more from our students and from youth surveys that this is something that's really important. It's also really motivational to be fully inclusive and to include, the global implications of what business for good is or could be. So I think I said I'd come to you, Fred, next.
Yes, and at Ecosia, climate action is very much at the heart of what we do. So it doesn't take much convincing for our leadership to invest in renewable energies, for example. But I suppose when communicating with leadership, what's best is to really have concrete and tangible examples that you can really bring forward, and to highlight the impact. And as a species, if we want to avoid global biodiversity collapse, we need to A, stop burning fossil fuels, and B, we need to reverse deforestation. And we already have solutions for this. We can deploy renewable energy, and we can stop eating so much animals. So three concrete things that your organization can do today. You can begin investing in renewable energies. It doesn't cost anything. It's a profitable investment. And it also helps to make your business more resilient against global markets. Another change that we've implemented at Ecosia is that we serve plant-based food at the office exclusively now, and this hasn't cost us anything either. It's reduced our environmental impact, and funnily enough, maybe employees have gotten healthier because of it. Let's see. But finally, organizations can switch to Ecosia. It's something that is free. It doesn't cost anything. It only is a few clicks from IT, and by doing that, you're helping to finance tree planting, you're helping to restore biodiversity, but also helping to helping with this global transition to renewable power, which is also incredibly important. So there's 3 actions that you can take straight away to your leadership, and they're hard to say no to because of the tangible impact that they can have.
That's brilliant, Fred, and great takeaways. Rishi, can I come to you?
Sure. So I guess I'd like to share 2 examples. One is in a corporate environment. One is more in a civic environment. So I think it will give some different scope of thoughts and maybe create others as well. So at NatWest, again, the leadership model, having your CEO stand up for something is really important. I will stand by that. If you can bring a CEO change moment, in our case as it was, gave us an opportunity to really get that as part of her new incoming strategy. So it really got us to bring sustainability to the top of house, and that was really important. But what I realised on reflection was it was equally important to have tied in everyone on that C-suite team. Now, some parts will be less relevant and some parts will be more relevant. But as Victoria referred to earlier, the CFO has an incredibly important role, whether it's in overseeing reporting, whether it's making investment decisions. My risk officer, my risk officer became one of my key friends. It was a different language I would speak to my risk officer because I was all about making sure we reduce our climate risks on our balance sheet in the future. And that was the language, and you had to speak the language of your leaders. Now, the example I just want to sort of segue to is actually in Camden and in local authorities, and we went down the Citizens Assembly model. You can read a bit about it. Some of it was well reported in the Guardian, as well as declarations of climate emergency. Declaration of climate emergencies with lots of local councils did. Now, I was a bit sceptical of the Citizens Assembly model because I wasn't sure what, if you take a random panel of people, how much of difference can it make? But what it really did was legitimise that declaration of a climate emergency. And having declared that a climate emergency, again, I was a bit sceptical, like without a plan around it, what does it actually mean? How do you then implement that decisions? We then later went on to change some of the constitution of the council, that there was a clear thought of the climate impacts of every decision being made. But that engagement, the key thing with the leadership, with engaging leaders, is you need to bring the people with you. So it's all one thing having your leaders engage, but if you're not bringing people with you, it will ultimately fail. And it's about making sustainable change, not short-term change. So your CEO, your leaders, immediate leaders, can make quick changes, but actually you need to change the whole organization and model that everyone is thinking about climate sustainability, even a little bit. It doesn't have to be, not everyone's role will be a full-on climate sustainability role, and that's fine. For our organizations to work, we need them to different people to be doing different things. So I think the challenge I'd say to people is the senior leadership bit is really important, and keeping that support and air cover, but actually you do need to move it across and change an organization.
Brilliant. And I love what you say about the Citizens Assembly, which is, I feel, a model. It's a deliberative democracy model, and I think it can be adapted within organizations. And it's surprising when presented with facts how people can engage and generate ideas and pull that into their role, as you said, even if it's just a little bit, or have ideas about systems within organizations. And I really appreciate those change moments. Sometimes it could feel like luck or bad luck if we don't have very senior leadership buy-in, but there are moments of change. So whenever those moments, and they're cyclical, whenever those cyclical moments of change happen, I think that's another opportunity for those of us working to achieve net zero, to ensure that we're briefing those new leaders, that we're supporting them, that we're really bringing that, well, not just the triple bottom line, but that financial resilience, that sort of risk management, to our leaders. Sophie works on a global project, and Sophie, I wondered if you could just take us out, and give us a little bit of a global perspective from the project. Tell us a bit about the project and what you hear from those partners.
Yeah, so my role with CCG was more supporting research and project activities. It wasn't really directly involved in developing policy or energy strategies. But I think for this question, going back to my experience with the garden project, I think Maria mentioned it and you mentioned it, Victoria, bringing senior leaders on board starts with first like understanding their priorities and what matters most to them. So to get support from the manager and from staff and other stakeholders, I couldn't just talk about biodiversity or environmental benefits. I had to show how the project aligned with the home's wider priorities, which was improving quality of life for the residents and improving well-being. I think, yeah, people are much more likely to support sustainability when they can see clearly how it helps them to achieve goals that they already care about. You don't want to ask them to choose between sustainability and organizational goals. You want to show them how sustainability can help them to achieve those goals. And yeah, I think through my studies at the Open University, I've become increasingly aware of and interested in the gap between environmental policy and practice. And I think that bringing senior leaders on board is an important part of closing that gap. Because we already know what needs to be done. But it's just a matter of helping organizations and also communities to put those ideas and that knowledge into practice as well.
Thanks, Sophie. And I'm really pleased you have the last word as probably the youngest person on our panel. So I'm going to draw us to a close and thank you so much to our panelists. I'm always inspired when we get together and share our examples. I hope you've enjoyed our session as part of Net Zero Week, the UK's National Awareness Week. There are a whole host of events happening throughout the week. So please take a look at the programme, which I think we've just posted in the chat. Please do join other sessions and perhaps consider sponsoring a session or getting involved and delivering a session next year. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch with you with some top tips for how you can help deliver net zero within your organisations. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.